Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Today, we are going to talk about imagination, the creative power of humanity. This is a subject from our philosophy course at the beginning of the second level. We have a discipline called psychology, where one chapter is dedicated to imagination. You might be wondering, is this philosophy or psychology? If you consider that philosophy is the love of wisdom, you will see within philosophy there has always been a search to understand humanity. The term psychology was coined more recently, even though the word psyche is of Greek origin. The pursuit of knowledge about the human being, know thyself, has always existed. We conduct a comparative study of what has been said about imagination throughout history. This is a very current topic. I don't know if you remember, but shortly before he passed away, Steve Jobs was once asked about this very subject, specifically. He was asked if he wasn't afraid of being replaced by his own creations, that the technology you create might steal your job. He replied that he thought this was a science fiction perspective, and that developing existing ideas, technology will be able to do better and better, but generating new ideas will always be a human endeavor and increasingly rare. This is quite interesting because it is always human and increasingly rare. Today we revolve around ready-made ideas, and it is very rare for us to channel our own ideas. And imagination is this tool of creation, of capturing our own ideas, of developing them. Ultimately, imagination even constructs ourselves, because we ourselves are an absolutely original idea. Each human being, it is an idea that must be found and developed. Everyone is unique, unrepeatable, and developing oneself also involves imagination. Let us look at some concepts as much as possible within a short talk. Those who are familiar with a bit of philosophy know that Plato already said there is a realm of ideas. It is as if there were a blueprint for the manifested world. The material plane is a reflection of this blueprint. Everything that exists here is just shadows. Let us imagine the following. Let's form an education committee and reform secondary education, or rather, high school. Let us reform high school. It will go from 3 years to 4 years. We will change the subjects, which will become more practical and focused on certain areas. Let us create a council and reform high school. Do you realize that this high school already exists in our ideas? Even before the first student ever sets foot there, one day, a student will enter there and becomes the executor of this idea of ours. But even if there were no students at all, it would still exist in the realm of our ideas. The student is not inherently a high school student. He is merely a temporary executor of an idea that existed before him. For Plato and classical philosophers, the world would possess a set of ideas that would take form, even if there were no human to see them, to witness them, or to experience them. What does Plato's theory of ideas have to do with imagination? He says that when these ideas are projected into the world, they do so in a more or less perfect way, according to an intermediary. When a human being with creative intelligence enters the scene, he has his head in the sky and his feet on the earth. He is a pontiff building a bridge between two worlds. He takes absolutely original ideas, brings ideas to world. When we have a society, as Jobs used to say, that is massified, lacking imagination, people do not have enough stature for their heads to touch the heavens. They have to bring to earth things that are not so perfect. He says that when things that are not so perfect arrive on Earth, they begin to develop a process that we call evolution. Evolution is nothing more than the shadows chasing after the object that generated them. It is the material world chasing after the world of ideas. The word evolution comes from a notion that is, in fact, Egyptian. The Greeks borrowed this notion from the Egyptians, which means to develop, to unroll, because in Egypt, knowledge was written on papyrus and rolled up. It is as if you were unrolling what is in the realm of ideas and reading and copying it down here. Development would be the ability to take these ideas and bring them into the world. This, then, would be imagination. It is interesting for us to understand this idea, whether we believe in Plato. The fact is, we see things always changing and striving for ever greater perfection, as if they were trying to live up to something expected of them. Everything seeks its own ideal. We expect things to be ideal. Our car, our clothes, our home. But we do not always expect this, as if we, too, did not have an ideal. Evolution means believing that all things have an ideal that is unique to them. Just as there is an ideal house, an ideal car, there is an ideal human. To develop or to evolve is to pursue this idea. At this point, we might think, the things that exist only in my imagination may not have any effect on the world. That is not imagination, it is fantasy. It is very important to distinguish between these two things. On the mental plane, we can have mental forms that we classify as imagination or as fantasy. The manifested world is dual. If there is light, there is darkness. If there's softness, there's also resistance. If imagined, there is its negative polarity, fantasy. Imagination is a blueprint for what he'll experience tomorrow. Today, I imagine what he'll do tomorrow. But it has a negative counterpart, which is fantasy. It is not a blueprint for tomorrow. It replaces tomorrow. Let's suppose I want to be a pianist. I picture being a concert pianist, gaining great success, the audience giving me a standing ovation, recording CDs with Deutsche Grammophon, which is every concert pianist's dream, enjoying that success. But I don't want to go through the effort of hiring a teacher. To start from the very beginning with the easy and repetitive pieces, with practice sessions that form calluses, I don't want any of that because it's too much work. I prefer to close my eyes and fantasize, and I find satisfaction in the fantasy. Fantasy is not projected to become reality. It is satisfied in itself. It replaces reality because it gives me satisfaction at a much lower cost. There are two elements we must learn to distinguish. One is highly positive and essential. Imagination is fundamental, and fantasy can give rise to a tendency, even unhealthy, to escape reality, or even some kind of mental alienation. It must be kept in check, but they are born looking very similar. They arise on the same plane, the plane of ideas. Actively, imagination. Imagination is active. I think of a way to solve a particular problem in my life. Think about it today, put into practice tomorrow. Fantasy, in general, is passive. Sometimes it wasn't created by us. We absorb it from our environment. The fantasies in our society are all very similar among people. There is a cultural standard of what it means to be a successful man. No one thinks. They simply absorb this standard. It's as if a person buys a ready-made life software and hits play. It's already written what a successful man is. He is the man who owns a certain kind of car and apartment, travels to places, holds a particular standard. So, as it's often very difficult to achieve, people escape into fantasy. In several lectures, I have already mentioned to you that the consumption standard of an average North American man is now the golden dream of happiness for the 7 billion human beings in the world. If we multiply this standard of living by 7 billion, we will not have a planet to support it. This is mathematically unfeasible. If we promise people a standard of happiness that they cannot attain, they will escape into fantasy. All the paths are already paved. They go to social media with identities that are not their own. They watch reality shows and soap operas. The escape routes are all laid out so they can split themselves. and deny their own identity as something bland and worthless. Fantasy is more absorbed from the environment than actually created by us. See, this is interesting. There is no way for us to create anything without having the final product as a model. It's like building a house without any idea of what it will look like. Doesn't that seem unfeasible? Will it require deep excavations, or is it a single-story house? Will it face west or east? There is no way to build a house without having a model of what it will be like when it is finished. There is no way for you to build yourself if you do not have a model of what you want to be. When you are a human being ready for life, complete, and if you do not create this model, it will be absorbed from the standards that society sets as official. Before you even realize it, you will find yourself imagining being a Globo soap opera hero. They are the most absolutely and completely useless figures that exist. They are heroes with no commitment to humanity, or to a social cause, or to wisdom. They are useless beings who exist to have fun, argue with girlfriends. If you do not choose your model for life, it seeps in through the cracks of inattention. And before long, when you least expect it, you are taking on this kind of thing. Fantasy is passive, and it is very likely to be contagious, and may not have even been created by you. It's interesting. When we see classic books speaking about wise men, we barely believe wise men exist. Lao Tzu, Confucius, Plato, great book authors on the history of humanity, say that the goal of human beings should be to attain wisdom, and they describe what a wise one should be like. I've been deeply interested in this subject. There was a time I wrote these descriptions on poster board and stick them on the door of my closet. Not pretty, just useful. Everything I read about wise people made me imagine what they would be like. How one day I might reach the point. I knew that if I didn't consciously fill that space, an unconscious model takes its place. I need to have a model, the blueprint of my house, so I can build in that direction. I had beautiful descriptions of wise people. The Taoist tradition of Lao Tzu is especially skilled at describing the wise. Lao Tzu, when you look into the eyes of a wise person, you see their deep gaze, and it seems that within there is a silent dialogue between two beings, dialogue between a human and a god. Can you imagine such a being? You look into their eyes and feel that within there is a dialogue, sacred, intimate, with something very profound. Beautiful things are said about what it means to be wise, because they themselves, Lao Tzu, Confucius, were wise. This excites imagination, helps us create a model. If we do not do this, because it's imagination, we fall into fantasy and end up absorbing a model from the collective. We end up with elements that we do not consciously admire, working unconsciously to guide our decisions. We are left with subliminal things, creating tension in us making decisions Iona. Our response to life. Ultimately, this is very important. Imagination is active. Fantasy is passive and, usually, contagious. Imagination plus willpower. When we hear the word magic, we immediately link it to a rabbit coming out of a hat. This does not follow the laws of nature. No rabbit will come out of the hat if it did not go in there first. Magic is a great science. The medieval alchemists used to say that magic has logic. It has science. There's a math equation behind it. Magic is a great science. The great science of building human beings has two ingredients: imagination plus willpower. You imagine what you want to become tomorrow and add your will to it. Where there is a will, there is a way. No one can stop you. When you combine the two elements, no one can stand in your way. You imagine you'll become such and such and apply will. Decision on the mental plane, perseverance and consistency on physical plane. No one can stop a person like that. They have an identity built upon an idea, and possess an inexorable rhythm to achieve it. These are the tools that build human beings, and interestingly, they are the two rarest things we have in our historical moment. We are very weak in terms of determination and willpower, and we're highly influenced by the ideas of the collective. We are not very imaginative, very little creative, and not very capable of daring in the realm of imagination. We became standardized humans. We are afraid of cloning, but we are already somewhat cloned, following a life software pattern where we simply press play. Human beings, endowed with imagination and will, are able to design themselves, carry this out in their daily lives. At any moment when we pause the scene, he knows that he is building himself according to the ingredients. One of the questions I am always asked is, how does one control the mind? This is a serious issue. We even have a lecture about it. I will give you a preview of the topic of that lecture. How can we control the mind? Our mind is immersed within the mind of humanity, just as our body is part of the body of nature, and it influences bodies around us. If I have the flu, I can transmit the flu to you. Don't worry, I don't have the flu. Our mind is embedded within the mind of humanity. Whatever anyone, anywhere in the world thinks, can pass through our mind at any moment. What a person on the other side of the world is thinking, an idea can pass through our mind. How could we not be influenced by the 7 billion inhabitants of our planet? Only when we define what our own thoughts are. I'm a person who is like this, who thinks in a certain way, who has certain principles, and who pursues certain goals and values. Anything outside of that is not me. Therefore, if an idea comes in, I can simply wave at it and let it pass by, as it is not mine, seek its true owner. I know what within me is truly myself. This is intelligence intellectua, to choose among. To choose from all the things you are not who you truly are. Identity is highest intelligence. The construction of oneself, on every level including the mental plane, is an act of will. I imagine in this. You can even do this in writing. In this, because I choose to be. I'll define myself and remain vigilant so that I do not become something else, unless I rationally decide to do so. I establish the principles that can outline my identity. Anything outside of that is not me. I do not identify with it. When an idea comes up, you identify with it. You take ownership of it and it becomes yours. This matter of constructing the human being is fascinating. The ingredients are imagination and will. Plan and pursue your intentions all your life. That's what life is about. If you are not doing this, you are merely surviving. If you are neither planning nor executing, you are just surviving. And what about fantasy? There is an example that is quite interesting. Imagine that life is like a car trip. Either you are in the front seat, clear-headed, looking at where you are going, or you are in the back seat, blindfolded, taken somewhere, unsure where. Do not think that if you do not plan your life, it will not end heading in some direction. That's not quite right. If you are not planning your own life, someone is, because your life is useful to someone. If it is not being useful to you, there are interests out there. There are people who benefit from you thinking in a certain way, to hold certain beliefs, to have certain values, or not to have them. So, if you are not planning, you are being planned. If you are not thinking, you are being thought for. In some way, you are contributing to something. When people say they do not commit to any idea, they chose the worst ideas, is alienation. You did not choose, someone else chose for you. Alienation is the worst of all ideas. Fantasy, someone plans and we execute. In the lecture we gave about the Kybalion, which are the laws of life in Egypt, we spoke about this mental gender that applies very much here. Our mind also has two polarities, the masculine and the feminine. It needs fertilizing by an idea which is the masculine, and then it develops this idea as if it were the feminine womb. Sometimes it is fertilized by an external idea from someone who comes to you and says, "Have you noticed that so-and-so is no longer looking at you? Don't tell him what I'm telling you. I'm giving you suggestion." The person leaves. From that idea, you begin to develop a series of thoughts, questions, and doubts. You start to develop a seed that was not your own. It's like a cuckoo's egg. The cuckoo lays her egg in another bird's nest. The other bird thinks the chick is its own because it was the one who raised it. This happens often in our mental realm. We don't imagine, we're imagined. Filters an idea into our mind, and then we work so that it grows and develops, not realizing the seed is not ours. This is typical of people who lack imagination. They are always hatching cuckoo eggs, always developing ideas that are not their own. They are not the creators of their own ideas, and consequently, not of their own lives either. Cracks in attention. It is very important that you notice this, though fantasy at first may have no intention of producing real events. The moment we lose focus, it will create them. Things that exist in the realm of ideas exert a certain tension to appear and generate real events. Imagine, for example, a person you do not like. You keep feeding thoughts about them, about how they are not a good person. You treat them coldly, but you do not let anyone notice this. One day, when you are distracted or stressed, you will greet everyone except that person. You will not see them, you will not even notice them. Because that idea you have been nurturing exploits distraction or stress. To create a real event, you end up ignoring the person. When you least expect it, that fantasy you've been feeding will produce consequences. Do not think that the mental forms you have nurtured throughout your life will go unpunished and that no one will notice them. They'll create real events. At some point, due to a lack of attention, you will make a mistake, because you nurtured the root of that mistake. If you don't want to hear ideas, do not feed them on the mental plane, or else be prepared to experience them at some point. There is a clear connection between what we think and what we experience. This issue of traditional medicine is quite interesting. I am referring to traditional medicine, since Egypt and the West practiced this too. In Greece, the priests of Asclepius also did this in the temple, which was a kind of primitive hospital. They used to say there's no way to cure disease unless you enter the subtle plane, find what's generating disease. Have you ever stopped to think about that? Once, I heard this from a cardiologist. Today, heart diseases are the most lethal, surpassing cancer or any other illness. This is true. Only traffic accidents surpass them. Heart diseases are extremely lethal, and I asked the doctor why there were so many heart diseases. She answered me that she thought it was because of hatred. She believed that hatred affected the heart. Selfish disunity. When they impact the physical plane, what do they tend to generate? Selfishness is cancerous. It fragments and isolates. It creates autonomous cells that do not work for the body. Traditional medicines used to say that all diseases come from a subtle plane to a concrete plane. The Temple of Asclepius in Greece welcomed people who came for care. Before receiving any medication, people had to sleep in the temple because during sleep, they dream of the causes of that illness. On subtle planes, they'd commit themselves to changing their patterns of response to life because meds wouldn't work. The illness would simply manifest in another organ. Disease comes from subtle to the concrete. Ideas come from the subtle to the concrete. The things we imagine will generate real events. It's a fascinating thing. I brought 2 examples to share with you. One of them is from a doctor who has published several books and who raises an interesting hypothesis. I don't know if it's true. He says that up to 2 years after people retire, there is a very high incidence of death. This is a statistical fact. Could it be because people spend their whole lives? When they retire, they'll do nothing. They'll just be idle, doing nothing. Doing nothing is like being dead. If you're alive, you're doing something. Maybe people program themselves to die, and the body simply carries it out. Is it possible that they set this program in motion, and the body put it into practice? It is a possibility. We imagine something and don't know practical consequences of it, but it will have consequences. A student once told me a story in class, which I found quite interesting. She said that for years she worked with a colleague who was always telling her that her greatest dream in life was to earn money without working. That was what she wanted most, to earn without working. After about 10 years working together, one day she had a serious accident, and still, 20 years later, she earns without working, lying in bed in her home. Are we programming the events of our lives or not? All the ancient traditions of medicine and philosophy say you are coding your own life. Today you are creating causes on the mental plane, which become facts tomorrow. Could there be a connection here? It's possible. At the very least, it is worth considering as a possibility. Reflect on this, the matter of the gaps in our attention that will generate events. Arise from our mental patterns. Becoming aware and taking the reins of the process. This means that everything I want to become, they'll think about it, they'll plan it. And I will outline for myself what my future will be, and I will keep reminding myself so I do not lose my way. In the philosophy course, there is a very interesting topic, which is about individuality, in which I ask this question: imagine if we put Plato in a time machine and brought him to the present day. He would enter with that philosophical calm that characterized him and ask one of us, "Who are you?" What do you think Plato would expect you to answer? It is a simple question. Who are you? What do you think he would expect you to say? It would be pointless to show him a document, because he would ask, "Are you this paper?" In his time, this little paper didn't exist. It also wouldn't help. He would ask you, "What is that?" What are you going to say to Plato? What is he expecting you to answer? When you tell someone your identity, this gives that person predictability about what you may or may not do in the future. If I give you my ID card, can you predict my future? No, not even using numerology on the numbers on my ID card. Would you be able to foresee my future? What could you tell Plato that would allow him to predict what is related to you and what is not in the future? The Egyptian Book of the Dead has a beautiful passage. Your inner name lies in the future. Do you know who you are? That which you imagined and fixed as your identity. Lucia, a person who intends to reach the end of life. More just, more integral, more coherent, and more fraternal. That is my identity. Now you know perfectly who I am. When I'm lucid, when I remember who I am, I strive to be more just, more coherent, and more fraternal. If I'm not doing that, I'm out of touch with myself. Either it was not me, or I was not myself. It is that feeling I have the next day, when I remember things I wish hadn't done. And I think I was not myself. What means to be within yourself? Where are you going? Do you realize we have to imagine this? Telling this to Plato, he would be satisfied, and he could even predict what you will or will not do. He can predict your future, the direction you are always heading. You are telling him where you intend to arrive. You are telling him your identity, created on the plane of imagination. In fact, ancient philosophy said that heart comes from cor, from courage. It is as if your heart is there in your identity, and the rest of your body is running after it. I love this. It's a wise person's ideal, so I want to reach it. If you don't occupy that space, it will be occupied by some image from the collective, and soon you will be working for that unconsciously. You will be making decisions based on that. Imagine yourself and do not fantasize, in addition to having a clear goal of who we want to become. When that painful moment comes, one we avoid thinking of because we fear death. But in those final moments, we look back, and what do we want to find within ourselves? What kind of legacy do we want to leave in the world? Let's reflect on this final work. Fix it firmly in our imagination. Beyond that, we must know, on this journey we undertake toward that goal, which step we are on. Because fantasy can deceive us. I want to be a just person and I am almost there. You might be surprised. How so? Be humble. You may want to be a just person and have a noble goal, but recognize which step you are on. Jung called this the inflation of the ego. You're on step 2. Imagine step 20. If you try to reach the 20th step first, you will fall and tumble down the stairs. Know where you truly are. This is one of the main causes of deep psychological trauma. Imagine a person who considers themselves very courageous. One day, they are caught off guard by a robbery. A criminal with a weapon. Does fantasy stand up to a robber? Fantasy's first to hit ground and leaves the person alone, exposed before what they truly are. Next day, the trauma isn't about the wallet they lost, but about having to face the mirror and remember they did. They forget what they did. There is a void. They lose their memory because they can't confront. That they cried, screamed, rolled on the ground. They can't bear confronting the disappointment with themselves. Because fantasy is not reality. It is first to leave a person exposed and helpless. Sometimes a person cannot withstand this trauma if you do not work to see yourself through a conscious effort of will. Life will corner you and will show you who you are because you need this. Life conspires for your evolution. As the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who was a great philosopher, used to say, you will be upright or you will be made upright. Either you work to see yourself or life will corner you. People say either you go willingly or unwillingly. At a certain moment, you will have to face yourself, because that is the meaning of life. Know thyself. So, there is fantasy regarding our goals, and there is fantasy regarding where we truly stand. Look at your footprints. Your deeds reveal you. At what point on this path are we? Is a person with many personal problems truly just? Is a person who struggles with relationships truly fraternal? Iona. Does a person who organizes their life a certain way truly have a good capacity for living together in harmony? We must examine the footprints we leave behind. We need to have a more concrete tool. We do not fantasize ourselves, because this means disappointment and very deep traumas. Human beings imagine that they think. This is an unrestrained fantasy. They say they have many ideas, but in truth, none of them are their own. Have you ever stopped to consider which idea you have had, in which you experienced the event, reflected upon it, created several hypotheses, tested these, a choice? This is how I think. This is how I think about people after all this reflection. Most people do not have this background because they bought the idea ready-made. In our society, it is very common for people to start hating a public figure. Tomorrow, they adore them. Day after tomorrow, they hate them again. Do you think these feelings are real, or have they been cloned? True and profound feelings take effort to build. No one hates or loves like that overnight. These words, hi, love, were just trendy expressions. Today, a public figure is loved by people. They're forgotten. The day after tomorrow. These collective feelings are not really yours either. They are invented. Authentic thoughts and feelings take effort to build. They require reflection and depth. Most of the things we think and feel are not truly ours. We are felt, we are thought. We have many concepts about life, but we do not. It is all copied. When we need an answer for life, there is nothing consistent. There are many facades, a lot of intellectualism, many concepts. When you apply them, not consistent, none of them are truly ours. This is another element that should also be examined. What, in fact, do we imagine? create with an idea, what we grasp, what we see, what we build. And therefore, we have authorship. This is ours, who we are, but it is very little. Most things are copied. There is still one last thing, which is quite complicated. Spiritual, noble, and elevated principles become our enemies, because they'll end our comfort, to our complacency. With this peaceful life that we lead, when we begin to see principles and values revolving around us, we know they'll disrupt our lives. I have already told you about an incident that happened many years ago. It had not been long since I joined New Acropolis, and I called one of my students, who'd been at the school a while, who suddenly missed my classes. I called to ask him why he was no longer coming to the school. And this student simply answered me the following: "I'm not going to the philosophy course anymore, because you are telling me things. This is me to change, and I want change. It's a lot of work. Life is comfortable for me now. If I take this course, I will be forced to confront things that will make me change. I prefer not to know." That was something that really impacted me, because faced with such honesty, what could I say to him if he didn't know? I could show it to him, but he already knows. Can't deny it. It's true. He really will have to change. If you don't want to change, what can I do? I can't deceive the consumer. In fact, philosophy does make you change. This is quite curious. Someone notices spiritual principles. They see them as their enemies. Since these principles disrupt their comfort, it's better not to know certain things. Do you remember the movie The Matrix? The first one, the character chose to go back inside the machine, knowing all of it was a fantasy, because it was comfortable, pleasant, and enjoyable. Illusion is wonderful. Illusion is wonderful. So I prefer not to know, so I don't disrupt my comfort. This is an inherent element of fantasy. A person imagines everything that is elevated as their enemy. They believe anything noble, heroic, elevated, or truly human will destabilize their life, not improve it. They want to keep their distance, to run away from it. In the case I mentioned about my student, he knew this. That's better. If unaware, you may react later, but most people are not aware of it. I called several other students besides him, and they did not respond to me with such sincerity. They gave various excuses and ended up not returning to the school. In truth, it is an unconscious escape, because they are afraid of learning things. Make them reconsider Iona toward life. Unsettling, uncomfortable, easier not to know. To become, instead of fantasizing about being. To examine the footprints we leave in the world, the responses the world has given us, to truly try to assess where we stand, and to build what we want to become. This is a strategy for constructing ourselves. Understand, things don't fall from the sky. Nature doesn't make leaps. How will become a better person for living together in community? To establish a strategy for that, how will I control my thoughts? Establish a strategy for that, I will end up scattered and unhealthy, which is a common case in our current historical moment. How will I build myself? Only by acting in this direction. Nature doesn't make leaps and nothing is free of effort. We must exchange fantasy for the work of building ourselves. The second point is very interesting. Be careful with assumptions, because they create an unreal world. Have you ever noticed those people who enjoy gossiping? If someone comes and says, "They were there where it happened, so-and-so did not do that," they would be taking the fun out of that conversation. Those who gossip are not interested in what actually happened. They have created a fantasy that's pleasant and satisfies them. If they find out what really happened, it loses its charm. They do not want to know the true story. This assumption creates a virtual world. in which we live because it gives us a certain kind of pleasure, most of what we think we know about others. Our assumptions, they are not reality. We think others like us more than they do, or that they reject us more than they do, or that they do more or less than they actually do. We do not see others. We project our own opinions onto others, as if they were a mirror. This projection replaces true vision. We do not want to know what things truly are. It is more comfortable for them to remain the way we imagine. We are not searching for the answer. We arrive with an answer, only wanting the facts to confirm our answer. It is as if someone holds a prejudice against a certain people. Latinos are no good. This person won't seek to truly know a Latino. She already has her opinion formed about them and does not accept others do anything to change her mind. She doesn't want to change her opinion. We make assumptions. This kind of alienation can create a mental bubble. Isolates us from reality. This is pathological. There are cases of people living in a completely virtual world where they invent feelings in others, behaviors in others, and for them, no kind of fact matters. That could be checked against reality because it is comforting to believe in that. Sometimes we assume that in a certain environment we will not be well received. We arrive there. We realize that it is nothing like what we were expecting. It feels like a different world. That was just a mental bubble. Full unhappy we came, but once there, it is nothing like what we were thinking. It was just a mental bubble. Sometimes we keep walking carrying this bubble with us and imagining the world instead of living it. That's also a fantasy. And it creates an addiction. Have you ever heard of victimization? Which is one of the worst addictions today. It's fantasy. Imagine people are doing something against you. If we don't have that feeling. Once I heard a doctor talking about this, and I found it interesting. Victimization creates a cellular stimulus equivalent to that of a drug. It is addictive. If I go 1 or 2 days without feeling like a victim of someone, I experience withdrawal symptoms. It's like a drug. It's addictive. Psychological addictions resemble physical ones. I feel the need to look at people, see they are discriminating against me, treating me badly, doing something to me. Else life feels very dull and I feel insignificant. It's as if people aren't even noticing my presence. This is one of the elements that creates an artificial reality, which can spiral into schizophrenia. I'm the target of the world. I'm insignificant. Why is everyone chasing someone like me? Don't they have anything better to do? Why are they thinking badly of me? What idle people! Why do they think so much about me? That's a real lack of mental substance. This kind of victimization is a form of self-projection. If I'm persecuted, it's because I matter. This gives me some prominence. It's pathological. It's the product of fantasy. I saw a report from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, today considered the best university in the world. Sometimes they conduct some unusual statistics. One of the topics was about how we go through life split in two. When we look at people on the street, we notice they're not there in body and soul. The body is walking mechanically, while the mind is imagining that it is the protagonist of a soap opera, or imagining the weekend or the holidays. People are split in two. In this study, they said, there is a human potential when people are attentive to what they are doing. All people have a potential for intelligence, for imagination. If people put all their attention into what they are doing, there would be great quality in everything they do. In general, we are not really present anywhere. They analyze the life of the average person and notice the moment someone's most attentive to what they are doing is during the sexual act. Only at that moment. For the rest of the time, they are split in two. If we had this same level of attention to every aspect of our lives, we would do everything with great quality. In general, we are divided. This is fantasy. we are moving toward because life seems bland to us, a realm with more flavor than life itself. So, this is the issue of the unreal world of assumptions. Committing oneself to healthy creation stimulates the imagination. You may have heard a quote attributed to Albert Einstein. We are unsure who said it. Since with quotes circulating on the internet, we never really know the true author. It says that a bicycle stays balanced while in motion. Try using a stationary bicycle. Can't balance it. In motion, the bicycle balances. You notice that when you have goals, when you want to build something, doesn't that awaken your imagination? When you have a sense of mission, if you want to accomplish something in your lives, when you want to add something to the world and yourselves, this makes you draw out ideas. According to Jung, this generates synchronicity. When we are deeply focused on creating something, it seems we attract forces of nature to bring us the tools we need. When I have to prepare a lecture, everything during that week seems to relate to that topic. When I was preparing my second lecture regarding the Inca civilization, I came across musicians playing Inca songs on the street. I would turn on the TV and the History Channel would have a program about them. It was an Incan pursuit. I was thinking about it all the time. It felt as if I was moving the universe to bring the Incas into my life. Interesting, because when you have a goal, a mission, when you want to build something, you set nature in motion to bring tools you need. If motivated, that sparks your imagination. You see the connections between things. You see something and realize how it can be useful to you. Those who have no mission have no imagination. Those who don't want to build something grand with their lives have no imagination. They're just clock punchers. In life, one day less, one day less. Imagination is directly connected to a sense of mission, to meaning, to the desire to build something with your life. Otherwise, it's impossible. You have to be in motion to keep your balance. Imagination stimulates memory. Anyone who has ever taken a memorization course knows that the most effective method for memorizing is through images. You imagine one thing on top of another, associate numbers with objects and create images. Iona. 7 is a cane, 4 is a chair, a cane on top of a chair, 2 is a duck, and so on until you memorize the numbers. You create an image and record it in your mind. The method of memorizing through images is the most efficient. Sometimes you can memorize a very long oral presentation by creating a hallway with several rooms where you walk in to see different things. Imagery is the best memorization method that exists. Those who don't develop imagination generally also lack memory. These are interconnected potentials. A very superficial memory is short-lived, with little capacity for data storage. Imagination and memory are directly related. To create images and to be able to fix them in the mind. I included this beautiful phrase from our international director who speaks about the Renaissance, who says this: we have the power of our imagination to simply connect with archetypal images. And as Giordano Bruno taught, to engrave these archetypal images in our memory. Every idea has an image. If we capture the image, we capture the idea. If we remember the image, we remember the idea. Giordano Bruno, who was a thinker of the Renaissance and who died in 1600 at the Inquisition stake, he had a memorization technique which led him to travel worldwide teaching princes. He never forgot anything. He linked life events with the stars. He was capable of memorizing long texts. His memory was prodigious. One of the ways he gained acceptance in medieval courts was by teaching his memorization method. Each idea has an image associated with it. If we are able to create this image in our minds, we never forget that idea. People with good memories are people with vivid imaginations. Something interesting happened to me. I used to listen to a classical piece of music, and an image would always come to mind. The melody would make me remember a certain thing. One day, I discovered that someone had written lyrics for that classical melody. Those lyrics perfectly expressed what I imagined when I listened music. This is not so random. When someone sets out to talk about a piece of music, if they focus, if they listen, they might take a photo, similar to another's view, because perhaps that sound is in fact associated with an image. It may not be a random association of people who have a paranormal ability called synesthesia. Everything that is perceived by one sense could be perceived by all the others. For example, sounds have a color, colors have a taste. There was an experiment conducted with two synesthetes in opposite locations in the United States. They saw similar things, musical note, and both picked one color. Both gave the same answer. It wasn't a simulation. They were given various stimuli, and the responses were identical. This is not random. When I fix an idea, it will always connect me to an image. If I have capacity to create images on the mental plane, I'm a person with a prodigious memory. This lack of memory is another problem of our historical moment because of a lack of imagination. This is also a phrase from a philosopher, Professor Jorge Angel Livraga, founder of New Acropolis. I have brought some quotes for you to reflect upon regarding this phenomenon of imagination. Just as Bruno, Paracelsus, or Jacob postulated, imagination can indeed move mountains, set peoples in motion, and with it, dreams can become reality. It is said that, just as what I think today, I will become tomorrow. What a generation thinks will be humanity of the future. We cannot become something that someone has not dreamed of in the past. Things are born first in the realm of ideas. If you believe in humanity and dream of a fraternal humanity, one day it will come to be. If you don't mentally create the possibility, it will never happen. To imagine is to make history. It is to believe in humanity and establish what we can become, and to help humanity also see this possibility. But in order to transform vision into reality, the one who acts must project their will with the purest feeling they possess. According to Ficino, a great Renaissance philosopher, imagination produces 4 feelings: desire, pleasure, fear, pain. If we don't control them, they stir the soul, causing it to become lost. Fantasy. Imagination requires the courage and determination to break free. As I mentioned to you about my philosophy student, he imagined himself more virtuous and became terrified, which led him to leave the school. We must control these emotions, otherwise we don't imagine. We are so afraid of growing, of changing, that we fall into the Penelope syndrome. What we build during the day, in the quiet of the night we go unravel the thread. If we do not have a basic control over our fear, our panic, our dread, our desires, we sabotage our own imagination. We prefer the bad that is familiar over the possibly good but unknown. We sabotage ourselves. Paracelsus, who was a great pioneer in medicine, used to say the following: "What is imagination if not a sun within man?" Imagination creates countless possibilities that nothing else would be able to create. For Paracelsus, active imagination is the intermediary between thought and being. Forms imagination as the embodiment of thought in an image, symbol. A good reader can grasp this. This idea of the symbol alone could be the subject of an entire lecture. Can you imagine that the way we act, the way we walk, the way we dress, the way we gesture, the tone of our voice, behind all of this are values we believe in, and that make us act this way? You know those mothers who, when they met their daughter's boyfriend, would say he wasn't good for her? Because of his way, they would say it was since the young man's way. That way was an old-fashioned way to talk about symbolic imagination. The way we act conveys things we believe in, and sometimes we are not aware of it. That is the symbol. If we imagine things clearly, soon we will begin to symbolize them. After many years practicing philosophy, without saying anything to anyone, one day at my workplace, work at the school, we all have our own jobs. We work voluntarily at New Acropolis. One day, at my workplace, while having my coffee, a person approaches me, even though I had never spoken about philosophy, complains about life, that they don't know what's happening to them, that they have everything society says is enough to be happy, that they are financially well off, have a good family. But something is missing. I hold the thermos and ask myself, who sent this person to talk to me? I've never said anything to anyone about philosophy. Never. It's as if I sprinkled a little sugar here on the floor, and suddenly ants start to appear going up and down the walls. We don't know how they show up. It seems to be an attraction by affinity. Those in need of value can sense values in the way you serve a cup of coffee. Without you ever having said a word, people come to you, not someone else. Why is that? In some way, you transmit who you are. Whether consciously or unconsciously, you create what you wish to convey. When asked how they can help promote New Acropolis, I always tell them that it's good to give a flyer to a friend, to share our email. But the most important thing is for you to be virtuous. Everyone will ask you why. And you will tell them, philosophy helped me to understand this. Things spread what they are. Apple tree spreads apples. Philosophers spread philosophy. If you have values, you spread values no other way. We can't expect an apple tree to produce oranges. If you don't live by values, hand out flyers freely. You still will not spread philosophy. Do you understand this idea? Behind our actions, behind our attitudes toward life, there are values. We need to be aware of this. Like it or not, we influence people. Let us be responsible for what we spread throughout the world. We must clearly envision what we want to spread, the image to show to the world. We can spread things we do not truly believe in. We must be careful. This is the idea behind the symbol, and a good reader can grasp it. It is said that the wise Egyptians, hierophants, knew whether a person had an aptitude for philosophy, whether they were honest or not, by the way they walked down the street. They knew to read symbols. Today, we no longer have depth for this. Intuitively, we grasp many things. By expressing himself, God manifests in a universe that exists between pure spirit and concrete reality. That is a mesocosm, the world of creative imagination. To imagine is to create, to reveal. When we imagine that we can be fraternal people, we are bringing forth something that was hidden within us and revealing it to the world. We are bringing hidden potentials that were within us into the world. Create a mesocosm, a bridge. We are a pontiff between heaven and earth. The potentials that were latent, we reveal them. We make them visible to the world. Imagination creates in man the essence of his purposes, the power of his emergence. This is a phrase from a French historian I find beautiful. Imagination reveals the potential we have within us. We can't imagine what doesn't exist. Imagination captures realities from the realm of ideas. We can't imagine ourselves if we didn't have that potential. We could not imagine being fraternal. We did not have potential, both for good and for evil. Imagination perceives possibilities that exist within us. If we identify with them and live them out through our will, we generate realities. Imagination with will creates realities, creates facts. It makes human beings into builders. This passage now is from Giordano Bruno, who worked extensively with this idea of imagination. Imagination claims to be the first bond of the soul, the intermediary between the temporal and the eternal. It is the sense of senses, and, properly speaking, the only true sense. It is the body and vehicle of the soul, the source from which human life flows, the most venerable method of communicating with God. We all have external senses, sight through which we see the surface of objects, hearing with which we perceive sounds, touch, and so on. Imagination is a mental sense. It does not invent, it feels out something that is within us. We are taking into consideration what many people from the past have said. Imagination is sense. It is feeling out something that is dormant within us. It has perceived something. It did not invent it. Sometimes we imagine things that we cannot be. But if we can visualize it clearly, we can. Walt Disney used to say that what we can imagine, we can do. And he did. We know what Walt Disney's life was like. Imagination is inner sense, which feels out what's most elevated and divine within us. To have a dulled imagination, to have mental laziness, which is the worst laziness possible, to not develop an inner life, not develop imagination, is to go through life as a stranger to oneself. It is to ignore, perhaps, what was most precious within you. On one occasion, I was in a local bookstore, just browsing, and I decided to leaf through a book, The Diary of Marilyn Monroe. It had been published recently. Even with a facsimile of her handwriting, there is a passage in which she says, "People think they love me. People don't even know me. They love a facade, a fashionable image. What I'm truly, not even I love. I don't know myself. I'm a stranger to myself. Maybe I will die this way." I was struck by this. We have so many stereotypes. If Marilyn Monroe were alive, I wouldn't invite her to a philosophy course because she's not interested. But it seems she would. It seems she needed it. She realized that within her there was a hidden core. Not even she knew what she was. I don't love myself. I don't know what I am, and I might die this way. Maybe she died that way. Imagination gropes for this inner core, your true identity. Imagination is a tool for inner life. When a person becomes dull, superficial, and complacent on the mental level, they become a stranger to themselves. These are some phrases that I brought because I found them very beautiful, and I wanted to share them with you. This is actually a true story that happened a few decades ago. It's the story of Jean-Dominique Bauby. I decided I wouldn't feel sorry for myself. Besides my eye, there are two things that are not paralyzed: my imagination and my memory. Jean-Dominique Bauby suffered a stroke and was left immobilized. Only one of his eyes could move, and he remained lucid. The diving bell and the butterfly, his work. He said he stopped feeling sorry. I have two very good things, one eye and my imagination. My imagination, my memory, and my eye. That is enough for me to do so much. What if a person has a whole body but no imagination or memory? What will they do? Perhaps much less than he did. We don't call these people disabled, but we do call him that. A person fully without imagination, of inner life, of self-knowledge. We don't call them disabled, we call him that. Isn't this question of values curious? This week, someone told me that there will be a Day of the Disabled. Who do we call disabled? A person incapable of an act of fraternity. We do not call them disabled. An insensitive person, others' feelings, we don't call them disabled. Use the word someone missing an arm or leg, but that person manages fine, or the other that is much more difficult. Philosophically, we should reconsider what disability means. Psychological disability and the disability of the soul are far more limiting than physical disability. And finally, a quote from Carlyle. If you wish to sow for eternity, sow in the infinite faculties of humanity, in their intelligence and in their imagination. There is a film that I really like and that is quite well known, Gladiator, with a famous line, "What we do in life echoes in eternity. It is not what we do physically, like eating or sleeping, because that's not doing, it's inertia, mechanical action. That is instinct, not truly us. What we do in life is what is expected of a human being. It is what we do in life in a human way. What's truly human in what we do in life necessarily passes through imagination and through will, and this echoes throughout eternity. This makes a difference, it adds value, it justifies our existence. All men die, but not all men truly live. Some merely survive. This kind of incapacity that dulls the human soul causes him to merely survive, to die without knowing what nature reserved for him, to die a stranger to himself. This is very sad. It is the worst form of incapacity. This is basically what I wanted to share with you so that you could have an idea of how important this was in the classical world. As I mentioned to you, this is addressed in our philosophy course. This is brief summary. And so that you can work a little with your imagination, dare to think about how much we can grow to serve ourselves and to humanity through our lives. Dare to imagine yourselves as great. Dare imagine yourselves human. Nature expects this. She made us for it. She envisions us as human. She created us for this. One of the worst things that exist in our times is to lose faith in the human being because we do not dare to imagine how great we can truly become. Yet we have this as an implicit potential within the human condition. If a person was great, that exists within us as an implicit potential, and it is our duty to imagine it as possible. Try this. Look at the life of a great person and imagine yourself doing exactly that. It brings a certain fear, but within you there is also a certain sense of glory. I truly can. And am I going to give up on accomplishing at least a part of this? I will not live. Answers to some questions from the audience.
Question: is fantasy seen in the negative light? Can't I fantasize, spend a few minutes outside of reality?
Answer: you will notice that it is quite addictive because it brings gratification without effort.
Question: but isn't that necessary? After a stressful day, don't we need a moment of escape?
Answer: there is another way to compensate for stress. By directing your awareness toward beautiful things, toward noble things, without acquiring addictions. It's like saying you're very stressed and going to use a drug. If you use the drug, you will pay a high price for it. There are ways to ease stress. Without using things that could compromise you, fantasy creates a substitution for real life. And this substitution becomes an addiction because it offers pleasure with less effort than reality. Soon you will find yourself scattered, unable to focus on anything. There are people we talk to, and this is very common nowadays. And after 30 seconds, they're no longer paying attention to us. They fix their gaze. But you can tell they are no longer present. They can't keep their attention for even a minute. Distraction is a disease. It generates pathologies. It's Machiavellian, ends justify means. Ill rest. I can fantasize for a good cause. The ends and the means must be coherent.
Comment, so I should imagine good things at those times.
Imagine good things. Elevate your consciousness with good music. Remember a good moment. Use your memory for that. Use inspiration.
Question, when we talk about fantasy, can we confuse it with imagination?
Answer, both are about creating images. But fantasy gives you a kind of pleasure without any intention to accomplish anything in your life. Imagine, for example, that I enjoy good music, and I play that good music in my mind. On the mental level, it brings me inspiration. It makes me want to be a little more loving, to express my feelings better. It generates a plan for action. Fantasy generates nothing. Instead, it traps us. We want out but can't. And with any lapse in attention before we know it, we've gone there. Create a parallel world that takes our lives. It does not generate any projection for future achievements. It has no connection with this world. It is a world apart.
Inaudible question.
Answer. In the lecture about the Kybalion, I spoke a little about this. Plato spoke much about music. Music is vibration. This vibration draws your consciousness. It becomes attuned to that vibration. We do not need to be kinesthetic or paranormal to realize that a person who enjoys vulgar music at some point will become vulgar. That a person who enjoys violent music eventually will express violence. Their consciousness has attuned to that level of vibration. Eventually, they will express related things. Nothing goes unpunished. In the Kybalion lecture, I told you that our essence, according to the Egyptian tradition, is the pattern our consciousness vibrates. That is who we are. The Egyptians called it the inner name. Consciousness vibrates on the plane. It vibrates when there is beauty, goodness, and justice. That is who we are. What do we need to do? We need to seek things vibrating in the same frequency so that we can anchor our consciousness there, or even pull it ahead. We begin to attune to things vibrating at a lower level. They will pull our consciousness downward. Throughout history, people have always spoken about refining one's taste. Taste is not without effect. What we read, what we listen to, the company we keep. Everything is vibration. When we attune ourselves to a very low vibration, our consciousness will return there. This is very complex for us, but for the peoples of the past, it was not. In Greek theater, they were very careful when someone was going to play a character who was a villain. The person had to be mature with a strong sense of identity and ample self-control. An immature person who plays the role of a villain very well, their consciousness identifies with that, and afterward they might see it as a possibility for themselves. This can lead to madness, delinquency, and so on. Comments about the film Batman: The Dark Knight. At the time, everyone was talking about the Joker from this Batman movie. Did you see that Batman movie where the Joker actor took his own life at the end? The actor was an immature person who isolated himself in a hotel to study the character, developed pathological identity. Character is pathological, and he was not mature enough for that.
Inaudible comment.
The Greek playwrights, such as Aeschylus, were very careful with the actors. They did not choose immature actors because that would create an affinity with a vibration that was not good for their consciousness. The actors were mature enough to disidentify themselves. Inaudible comment. The Joker is a psychopath. He acquired the mental pattern of a psychopath. He created this possibility within his psyche and identified with it. For a Greek, doing this to a person would be irresponsible. The kind of music we listen to, the kind of reading we do, this affects us. When we cultivate habits of listening to good music, we create constructions in what we do. Since we are not musicians, we build in what suits us. A philosopher creates works in their own life. Person of values generates values, but of that vibration pattern, there is a relationship between the house we build, the values, and the music we listen to, though they're different things. They are all vibrating at the same pattern, in the same frequency.
Comment. The classical music you listen to while studying stimulates your learning potential.
Especially Baroque music. Have you ever heard about studies done in plant nurseries? Did you know that plants like Bach? What refined taste they have. Plants enjoy music, and it's not just any classical music. They prefer Baroque, especially Bach. Plants have better taste than most of humanity. There is a vibrational pattern that influences even plant life. This is quite fascinating. Several studies have been conducted on music in plant nurseries.
Question. In the example you gave about this coffee break, in which the person approached you to complain that they couldn't experience any real sense of happiness or true contentment in their lives, always feeling as though happiness was just out of reach. How do you explain that philosophically?
Are you asking me why that person wasn't happy? Answer, because he had a comfortable survival pattern, but he did nothing for anyone else, nor did he do anything for growth as a human. It was that routine of coming home and turning on the TV, into the club weekend, but being unable to think about the pain of humanity, unable to develop a deeper sense of justice. In other words, he was focused only on his own little personal matters. Plato has a very beautiful definition of love, which says, "There is a threshold of human love. It is when you stop looking, asking what use are they to me. You have to see things and ask, how can I serve this? When you put yourself at the service of humanity, when you take the pain of humanity as your own problem, when you take responsibility to be better to set an example, when you feel the need to add something to the world, you are stepping out of your personal bubble. No matter how good a person may be, if they live only for that little bubble, like a cell useless to the body, it is self-serving. How can humanity live as an organism if there are cells that don't think of the body? Cells must think about the body. Otherwise, it becomes unhealthy. No society can survive if everyone is only for themselves. That is unworkable. We must cross this human threshold of love, where one begins to feel committed to humanity and feel it as their own family. We must break through this bubble and feel ourselves as members of humanity, which is also our responsibility. And there comes a time when our soul longs for this, as is the case with this anguished person, who, though having everything, has not yet found their purpose. They have built but still feel the need for something more. What is missing in their life?
Question. Do you think there is already a significant movement or shift happening at this point in time, in the sense of us actually transitioning from religion to other paths, such as philosophy? Today, philosophy serves me more than religion does. I am much more interested in being here than in being in a church. Some time ago, religion was considered the opiate of the people. And there were already those who foresaw the moment when humanity would exchange religion for some other movement, perhaps. Could something be happening in this direction or not?
Answer, your reasoning is not wrong, but from a broader perspective, we must avoid having prejudices. Imagine, for example, a mother who wants her child to eat salad. She cannot simply tell the child to eat salad because it contains fiber, which helps with the peristaltic movements of the intestines. The child would not understand anything and would probably ask the mother for some chocolate instead. What should the mother say to a 5-year-old child? "Sweetheart, eat your salad or Santa Claus won't bring you presents." If you eat your salad, mommy will be happy. You have to work with an idea that the child is capable of understanding. At this moment, fear and desire are of no use. Education works with what the child can understand. There are various stages. Imagine a large triangle. A basic stage lifts a person out of mere survival and begins to instill values within them. But this is a stage in which the person still needs an external element. God is sad. God loves you. Later, they move to deeper questions. What is God? They begin receiving deeper answers. God is intelligence organizing everything. No chaos, just cosmos. Progress, and when they reach the threshold, they start asking more profound questions, which would be on a level parallel to the ideas of religion and philosophy. The writer talks about this in a rather humorous way. He calls it post-death 100, post-death 200, and post-death 300. Post-death 100 is when the person only wants to receive blessings and not be punished. The person starts to ask, why are people punished? Is God just? What is justice? Where did I come from? Where will I go? They approach post-death 200, reaching the philosophical realm. Then, at that moment, they begin to ask, why is God separated from me? Why am I apart from you? Are we two or are we one? What lies behind all of this? They have moved beyond philosophy and reached wisdom post-death 300. This classification by the author is quite amusing, but it was to show everything has its own time, and nature does not make leaps. What happened in Egyptian religion, for example? When a person asked deeper questions, the priest would tell them to study philosophy, as that could help them. When they reached a level in philosophy, should move on to the mysteries, the initiation, because now you are beyond philosophy. In the historical moment we live in, this no longer exists anywhere. Philosophy has become intellectualized. There are no more mysteries, and religion does not answer all the questions. The civilizational pyramid is disconnected. People start asking many questions and cannot find answers. Philosophy no longer has anything to do with life. It's mere intellectualism in philosophy's history. Mysteries don't exist. There is a dichotomy that was never meant to exist. In Platonic philosophy, there is no dichotomy at all. Plato was developing a perfect logic, and suddenly he would turn to the god Apollo, the Delphic god, then to the Panathenaic festivals. There was no dissonance at all. Then he would enter the mysteries of Zeus. Everything was interconnected. It was the same in Egypt. In India, a person would leave a Vedanta school and enter into philosophy, into the mysteries. Everything was connected. Our current historical moment is materialistic with shallow ideas. It seems as if we are waging a war. Inaudible comment. Let us not go into details regarding denominations, but what we can observe is that when a person has a natural, healthy relationship with religion, they like philosophy. When a war begins, or when a philosopher denies religion, it is strange. What would be natural is for each thing to have its own moment and to flow. There shouldn't be any conflict there. I have given many lectures outside on various occasions. Here, it is quite different. You come here to attend a philosophy lecture when you'll go to universities. The students are often there out of obligation, and am speaking about the thing I love most, that moves me the most. And the students are doing other things, like selling jewelry, and so on. There are people who are simply not at the right moment for philosophy. We cannot force them. Everything has its own time. These people need to have a religious ethic, one that sets their boundaries. If they lack this, they become slaves to their instincts. This is good, it's necessary. It is not good when fanaticism takes over a person. Moving through these stages is natural in human culture. It is not natural when this becomes closed off, isolated, and does not allow for growth. If a wise person appears, he'll say philosophy is not for them, and they should go to Tibet. But not to Tibet. It's full of Chinese people there. I don't know where to send them. But so far, none have shown up. They are rare.
Question, and what about childhood fantasy?
Answer, it is very difficult for us to define what childhood fantasy is. Many things are fantasy, and that are a reality. It often happens that a child says they have an invisible friend. From our limited experience educating children, we have observed, most invisible friends are not imaginary. They are nature elementals that children are able to perceive. They see fairies and other beings. Their innocence allows them to see. But when it is a process that is replacing reality, when the child won't study, because their little friend will help them on the test, it is avoidance that can become dangerous when leading to maladjustment. Children in general have a very strong imaginative process. They dream of being the prince, the princess, and they can be, and they should. They have dreams of nobility. There is a very beautiful book by Professor Michel Echenique, who founded New Acropolis in Brazil, and it is called The Two Ends. He used to say that this dream children have of being the prince or the princess is what they will fulfill at the end of their lives. Lives' ends meet. But now they defend their dreams. No one will take them now. What will we become? We will have blue blood from the blue. To have behavior entirely guided by nobility, dignity, that's being a prince. Slaying dragons, which represent brutality, violence, madness, and alienation, in order to save the enchanted princess, which is our own soul. All of this is symbolic. What a child believes in is more real than what an adult believes in. I give lectures about fairy tales. I believe in Santa Claus. It's real. Santa Claus is the Ancient of Days. That figure dressed in red in the midst of the snow symbolizes the coldness of materialism and the soul vibrating right there in the middle. Santa Claus is symbolic. Will tell children Santa Claus is a lie and make them believe in consumerism and sensuality. That is the real lie, leads nowhere. What we call fantasy in a child. Imagination. The child imagines a nobility. Someday they may live out. They can become what they are imagining. Sometimes they perceive things in nature that we do not notice. That too can be reality. We must discern what is truly fantasy. When it crosses the line, it is becoming pathological. That is, when it replaces reality. If a child won't clean their room, because their invisible friend will do it, that is a case that needs to be examined. Child may act lazily, or as an escape from reality.
Question regarding this particular issue of the collective. With our politics divided into two poles, where people do not truly understand each other at all, and everyone is only out for themselves. No one thinks about the country anymore. Some want to seize power. Others want to stay in power. How should we view all of this?
Answer. Behind any human problem, there is often, in fact, something more. Whether political, economic, or social, lies selfishness. Selfishness shows in politics. In the case you're describing, it manifests in the economy and elsewhere. Selfishness is not only in leaders, but in everyone. Plato speaks about this. In his book, The Republic, he discusses at length the formation of leaders. When you see a child who picks a flower from their garden and brings it to school, because they want many people to enjoy the beauty of that flower, who wants to share the best things they have, they may one day become a leader. But that child who takes something from school and brings it home so it's theirs alone, that child will not become a good leader. You cannot expect from a person that they be something they are not. That is cruel. You cannot expect an apple tree to bear pineapples. An apple tree can bear apples. When you plant an apple tree, you expect it to bear apples. When you place in power people who have not outgrown wanting things only for themselves, and you give them the freedom to take everything and bring it home, knowing that they have not overcome this, you expect an apple tree to bear pineapples. It is cruel to expect from people what they cannot give. Do you remember the little prince? When the king says to him, to ask the sun to rise and set every day, he replies that the sun already does that on its own. That's the very nature of the sun. The king tells him that it would be cruel to ask the sun something not in its nature. He won't be king, just a tyrant. You can't ask people for what they can't give you. When a person is selfish, you can notice it as early as their adolescence. They need to be educated, but do not let them govern. Power will give them the opportunity for that selfishness to be realized on a large scale. Sometimes we project onto someone in power a flaw that we also possess. Would we not do the same thing if we were in their place? Do we want all beautiful things just for ourselves? Or do we think about sharing, about making the path we walk more beautiful? Do we care about leaving places we pass through better than when we arrive? This is characteristic of a leader. If we do not know how to recognize this characteristic, because we lack it. If we have it, we see it in others. If we do not have it, we should be less harsh with people who also lack this characteristic. When I watch these politicians giving interviews on TV, I feel sorry for them. They are simple-minded. They are apple trees that bear pineapples. They cannot do more than they do because they do not have that psychological capacity. Why do we believe they had it? We don't see. Why don't we see? We don't have it. All of us in some way are responsible. Selfishness blinds us. If we had fraternity, we'd recognize who has it. If we had greater capacity giving, we would see who have it. We lack it, so we don't see it. It is like a turtle at the top of a tree. How did it get up there? Someone put it there. And someone must take it down too. A turtle can't climb there alone. We put it there. We did not see it was a turtle. We must learn to recognize the turtle. We need to search within ourselves to recognize it outside us.
Question: why do we, in fact, lack the ability to look at others and see all of their negative characteristics, perhaps?
Inaudible comment.
Answer: imagine that two people shoot at someone. Imagine that two people shoot at someone. One hits target, other doesn't. You punish whoever hits the shot. You're not punishing the crime, but the aim. Bifal, and the one you put in power enriches themselves. You are punishing the person's bad luck. Because everyone, or at least most people, could potentially do the same. One was unlucky to have opportunity. The others did not. They were lucky. You are punishing fate, not the person. Notice this. It is harsh, but we must be mature enough to recognize it. If I have virtue and put myself in power, I want to bring everything I have in my own home to contribute there, because I want to leave the place better than it was when I arrived. So I am able to discern who has and who does not have. If they'll go about depleting the world just to adorn my possessions, I want everything to be mine. Then I should not judge others. The element within you is the same as one in power. How many times do we encounter extremely selfish people? And it is these people who complain about the government. Dishonesty stems from selfishness.
Share your comments about how the place where you currently live is reflected in your daily life or in your experiences.
In people's behavior in traffic, which varies from country to country.
Don't judge too harshly. It's merely a reflection.
Comments: here in Brazil, people often use their cars as weapons.
Traffic here is brutal. But when we go to a country in Europe, for example, that politeness is just a very superficial veneer. Deep down, they are selfish, arrogant people. We are transparent. We do not have that social veneer.
Comments: I don't know if it's a matter of evolution or of punishment.
It's more about pride and vanity. The English philosopher Roger Scruton wrote about this. At the time when there was unrest in London, and that many middle-class people took to the streets breaking everything, he said that the English refinement is just a thin veneer, a film. Any social upheaval makes them lose their composure. That is not true education. It is just a facade. Deep down, we are barbarians. Words sparked outrage, but they reflected reality. A person who was truly refined would be sensitive, humane, fraternal, would care about those beyond their own borders, would not discriminate so much, would not be so vain, so arrogant. Often, we have this habit of attributing this only to Brazilians. Brazilians are dual, just like any other human being. We are more transparent because we did not receive that kind of education to have a veneer, a polish. That looks good for the English to see. In that sense, we are quite rough. But sometimes we are more fraternal than we are treated in a country like France. It is rare for us to be treated in Brazil. Treatment in one of those countries. Sometimes we are warmer than anywhere else. When we return from abroad, we feel this impact. The way people look at us, the way they speak to us. Brazilians have a certain human warmth. They are helpful by nature. Everything in the world is dual. No one is that perfect. Channeling willpower is a decision made on the mental plane. Perseverance and consistency physically. Decision is identity. We must love our identity and the values it holds. One of the things destroying a human lacks identity individually and collectively. Brazil values like other places, even though it is immersed in a culture of licentiousness, of permissiveness. We are immersed in a culture of licentiousness, of permissiveness. Europeans might do the same. No values. They act out of a method of social coercion, of social conditioning, which is very superficial. It's not deep, not a true transformation. We see selfishness everywhere. Human problem. It is not a Brazilian problem. Unfortunately, how wonderful it would be if there were fewer selfish people. I am deeply grateful for everyone's presence.